Namaste. Welcome to the Shaman and the Mermaid. I know you're excited because we're back. Don't you think? This is the astrology report for November 14th all the way through November 30th, our son Max's birthday. And it is a Scorpio New Moon, and we're also heading into eclipse season and a few other things. You want to talk about some stuff?
I'm excited about this new moon because it kicks off Diwali, and Diwali can be pronounced two ways, Diwali or Diwali. The W in Sanskrit can be pronounced a V or a W, so if you hear it both ways, it's both correct. And Diwali is another high holiday. We just came off a Navratri, and now it's Diwali. They have many high holidays, and it's one of my favorite things about India is their exuberance of celebration of spirit and life, and in this case, the celebration of light overcoming the darkness. And so that's going to have a little play in our theme this week of talking about some of the new moon's energy, bringing forth kind of a new dawn and a new beginning, and coming off of the election. And I think there's a lot of aspects in this report that showcase some of that light coming through potential. So we'll get into that. But first, the theme. The theme this time is a Carl Jung quote. He's one of our favorite philosophers, if you will, that we've done a little bit of intensive study with. And we pulled up one of his quotes. As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. It's a long one, a mouthful, but I thought it was, or we thought it was timely for this time with some of the aspects that are going to be playing out the next 2 weeks, plus that Diwali celebration of the light overcoming the darkness. So we'll jump right into it, and it's starting on this new moon, November 14th. The sun and the moon are together on new moons, and it's in a sextile, which is a lesser known aspect. We don't talk about sextiles too much, but it's sextiling with Pluto and Jupiter, which is a pretty big deal right now going on. We in the last report we talked about it a little bit, and so this new beginning of the sun and moon together are creating this positive light or energy going forward for us, and that harmonious sextile with Pluto and Jupiter really helps bring that brilliance to the shine. Pluto, if you remember, is the soul self. That's the energy of the planet. It's the ability to go into our underworld and our shadows and look at our own darkness, and it's conjoined or right next to Jupiter right now. That's a pretty predominant force in the astrology, Pluto, Jupiter conjoined. And Jupiter is our faith, it's our wise teachings, it's our truth. So our soul and our truth are coming together in harmony on this new moon. There is that harmonious sextile. You want to say something to that particular Pluto-Jupiter conjunction?
The actual conjunction was on November 12th. And it is the last time that Pluto and Jupiter will be together until 2033.
Long time.
Long time. So they're cruising on. And to use the terminology of the moon, this is a new moon cycle for Pluto and Jupiter. They're together, just like the sun and the moon, and it will take all the way till 2033 for Jupiter to come back together with Pluto. So this is a cycle of time, a cycle of energy, a cycle of evolution unfolding. As Katrina said, Pluto is the soul, the force of evolution, transformation. Jupiter has to do with truth and learning things and evolving as well. So we're undertaking a whole new cycle. And this relates into all of that 2020 boardroom energy of Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter that are all very close in the sky. You can see Jupiter and Saturn in the night sky towards the west in the evenings. Pluto is right next to Jupiter right now, even though you can't see it with your eyes. And so I am optimistic that this is starting a new cycle of transformation on our planet. I don't think it's necessarily the end of some chaos and some churning, but I do think that this gives the feeling of something tangible, something is percolating, something is positively coming forward.
Just a little side note, we have a telescope. Michael has this really wonderful telescope, and we took it out the other night to look at Jupiter, and we could see 3 of Jupiter's moons through the telescope. It's pretty fascinating. So I would encourage you, if you have any kind of telescope at home, go out and take a look. Maybe you'll have that same fortune. It was fabulous, just kind of breathtaking. It's a little side note on Jupiter. Okay, so that's all Diwali, kicking off the celebration. It's a 5-day celebration. It's called the Festival of Lights. People make these wonderful, kind of like a mandala, a rangola, and it's made with herbs and spices and lights, and they set them out on their front of their house and light them at night so that they can show that celebration. That's a way to celebrate it. And if you wanted to participate, you can make one yourself. Just Google Diwali and some of the beautiful artwork that comes around as a way to just help us all remember to stay to the light and to allow ourselves to come into, as the quote said, to kindle the light in the darkness of mere being. And then we move on. The very next day, we had this harmonious energy on the new moon, and then the very next day, November 15th, Sunday, Venus will have a square to Pluto and Jupiter. Remember, Pluto and Jupiter are together, so whenever we say one, they're going to be the other one too. So Venus will come into a square with these 2 big heavy hitters. And remember, squares are usually a challenge. It's usually some kind of duel or some kind of butting of heads. Not always the case if we're working with the energy in the right way. It can be that dovetail that we've often referred to it to. So I would propose that on this particular one, letting Venus, which represents our values and our self-worth and our love, for self and others, to have that dovetail with the higher learnings that we're coming into for the soul self, instead of butting heads. Our little self could be butting heads with our high self on this day, kind of an internal conflict of maybe what we want and what we think we value versus what we know on a deeper level, where our soul should be going and what we should be doing for that dharma or purpose. Pluto and Jupiter together really enhances or shines a light on your dharmic path. They coming together are showing you the wisdom and the way for what your soul's purpose is. And so that little Venus self could try to fight it, or it could work with it. That's on November 15th. And then we cruise along on November 17th. We have Mercury in opposition to Uranus, and I like your description of these 2.
My description of these 2 is that they're octaves each other, or the same note, but one is one lower and one higher. Mercury and Uranus share a lot of similarities of what type of energies or frequencies they're connecting to. It's the mental realms, it's thought, it's electricity, it has to do with the nervous system. They both have to do with transportation. One is earthly and another one's between the worlds. They also have to do with things like the internet and communication and how our brain works. Uranus is the higher octave, and Uranus represents the part of you that is your super soul or your subconscious, the part that you're not fully aware of yet. And that can include lots of things, including your fears, your shames, your guilts, memories that you've suppressed and pushed away. It also includes your genius and your potential and your creativity that you haven't tapped into either. And so Uranus is sometimes called the Great Awakener as an energy, and its job, if we give planets jobs, they don't need us to give jobs, but their frequency is Uranus works to bring that unknown energy into the known conscious ego self and bring it forth. And Mercury is the part that we do know mostly. It's what we think, what we analyze, what we speak, what we teach. And so when they're in opposition of each other, it's your ego mind sitting opposite of your high soul mind. And like Katrina said, it could be a nice conversation. They could be checking in, having a cup of tea, saying, what do you think about this? And the high mind says, I like what you've done there. Let's keep going. More creativity. Or if they're out of alignment, it could be Uranus having a stern conversation with Mercury.
I think, too, he touched on it, the nervous system is ruled by both of these planets. And so there could be just a little bit of overload. So good day on that Tuesday, November 17th to work on that meditative quality, tuning into your higher power, being a little more low-key, subtle energy so that you can keep the nervous system out of that fight or flight kind of manic state that has a strong tendency to fly into right now these days. So extra self-care on that day for the mind stuff. Just let everything stay in quiet mode.
This is also the last of 3 times that Mercury and Uranus have been opposite of each other in the last 3 months. Mercury was retrograde, went opposite of Uranus, went back and came forward. And so this is sort of a closure of some energies that have been moving through our field in the past, most intensely month, but 3-month swath on either side.
Okay, so then we cruise along November 19th and we have Venus again. And remember, Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn are that big elders or the board of directors up there.
I like elders better.
Elders, yeah. And so even though Pluto and Jupiter are really close together, Saturn's just a little tiny bit away. So they're in a very loose conjunction, all 3 of them. So Venus just 4 days earlier was squaring Pluto and Jupiter, and now 4 days later on the 19th, she's going to square Saturn. And again, Venus is, your value system, what you hold as your worth and self-respect and self-love. And Saturn is law and order. It's that judge and jury of your soul self. It's your karma. And Venus, your values and your karma are coming to a square on that day, Thursday, November 19th. And so it can be a little bit more of, like Michael was saying with Mercury and Uranus, where the little self is not in compliance with what the high self is asking of it. And this is all part of that moving into the light, letting our darkness not be such a fear, our own internal darkness, of our own shadow, of our own shames, of our own unconscious energy, as well as the collective darkness where we fear to step into any territory for fear of conflict with somebody or fear of getting sick or we're very tight down, and this is asking us to listen to that and go into that a little bit with, again, without the combat, but with that dovetail. And I wanted to bring up another quote that Carl Jung says that's maybe a little more well known. He says, there is no consciousness. We can't step into consciousness without some element of pain. And so as we are all waking up here on this planet and coming into the realization of our light, that we are beyond just earth walkers in a human form, that we have this divine soul and this immense spirit and this incredible potential for creative life force, as we're awakening to this, there is going to be some pain. Without that consciousness awakening, there has to be that pain. That's one of Carl Jung's quotes. And that pain doesn't have to be, physical pain. The pain might be the pain of letting go of old beliefs, the pain of letting go of attachment to the way that we've done things for so long, and now we're stepping out into unknown territory and it's scary and fearful to us. That could be the pain that we're talking about, but that's also stepping in that darkness to kindle that light for the existence of our being. So that's a lot of little self versus high self in the first kind of half of the report. And then Venus is going to move into Scorpio on November 21st. You want to speak to that one?
I think it reiterates your theme. I mean, you had stated when we were discussing this that you think Venus is pretty comfortable in Scorpio. And Scorpio has to do with the sign of letting go of things. And what Katrina said is that that personal self goes into the sign of the underworld of death, of shedding, of like the leaves dropping their trees, so they can prepare for the next evolution, the next season. And as Venus goes into Scorpio, it's kind of like Persephone going into the underworld and taking a journey there. And she gets stripped down naked, and she's in the underworld for the dark season, and then comes back resurrected, renewed to rebirth the springtime. And so this, as Katrina was saying, could be a time of stripping down of the consciousness and getting to the essential values of Venus, or what is of most importance to us.
You use the word essential, and I like that because part of Venus energy, and why I think she's very comfortable in Scorpio, is that root word in there of the senses. Essential is sensual, and she's a very sensual energy, and Scorpio is very sensual energy, and so our senses are heightened, and we can tune in, and in this underworld or inner world or shadow space or this darkness inside of ourselves, that we can explore in a feeling of safety. We're going into the dark days now. It doesn't feel like it because the weather's been so great, and we live in Colorado here where we have 300 days of sunshine anyway. But this is going in towards the winter, towards the dark time. And this is the time for us to be our own Persephone and go into our own underworld, strip down naked and get raw and real, and let ourselves feel those feels that we're experiencing right now in this dawn of a new day that we are entering into as a collective, and not to be afraid of it. Celebrate that little light that's being kindled right now. And speaking of light, on this same day, November 21st, the sun will be moving into Sagittarius. So Venus crawls over into Scorpio, sun crawls over into Sagittarius. I like the sun in Sagittarius.
I think the sun likes being in Sagittarius. Something I want to say about Sagittarius energy and Scorpio energy is, in astrology, Scorpio is the sign most directly related to death. And for many people, the idea of contemplating death, addressing death, working in the death realms, the underworld, the shadow world, is frightening. Because, as our friend Alan Watts says, he has this thought experiment. He's like, a lot of people are afraid of death because you think you're going to be locked into a dark room for eternity, and that's it. But in astrology, Scorpio, which is the death sign, is not the last cycle. There are 4 more cycles after death in astrology, and the next one is Sagittarius. After one experiences moving through the Scorpio realms of loss, of stripping down, of getting to what's essential, they resurrect into the sign of Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is the sign of returning to the light, of getting wisdom from what has happened before, and understanding what one has traversed through all those hell realms, death realms, transformations, growth, evolutions. And so Sun in Sagittarius is supporting, I think, Venus's journey into that Scorpio realm. And it's kind of a resurrection day. And if I may, this is actually a very important energy around the whole planet. This is the time of year where the constellation of the Pleiades, which is right by Taurus in the sky, you can find it easily by finding Orion's belt and then go over to the right about maybe 3 or 4 fist lengths, and you'll see this little constellation in the sky. And many cultures around the world, if you ask them where they come from, they will point up there to the Pleiades. And I love when science at least somehow confirms or lays another layer to that. NASA, when they say, where did the essence of the Big Bang come from? The Pleiades. That's the direction they point to.
It's just a very faint, it looks like a little fuzzy light in the darkness. And look on, even though it's directly at midnight overhead, is that correct, on the 21st?
Yes, and technically it's the real term midnight. It's overhead directly at the midpoint between sunset and sunrise, which may not be actually 12
o'clock, but it will be between sunrise, sunset, directly straight up for us in the night sky. But on that new moon back on the 14th would be a really good time to look at it, because you don't have the conflict of the moon taking away from the light, since it is a little more difficult to see. And Michael alluded to many wisdom traditions have looked to the Pleiades, and including in our own yogic tradition, the Pleiades are the rishis, the seven seers, and these Pleiades constellations are the seven sister stars that make like a little shell-shaped, kind of a nautilus, chambered nautilus spiral, if you will. And these are the seven Pleiades. And in the Japanese tradition, it's called Subaru. And that little symbol on the car is to be a mimic of that constellation of Pleiades as well. And the Pleiades are wisdom bodies to be looking to, and they're bringing us that light consciousness, or the opportunity for us to tune in and awaken to that light at this time of year. And it's a good time to go out and just kind of bathe in that as well. This is all on November 21st. So Venus into Scorpio, Sun into Sagittarius, the Pleiades at midnight, and it's a half moon in Pisces all at the same time. And that's about midway through our report as well, and because of the half moon. And then we move on. Is there more to say about, I wanted to say something about Sagittarius, Sun and Sag. Like Jupiter, Sagittarius is a truth seeker. It is a visionary. It is wanting to, it takes the curiosity and seeks the fact of it. Not just, I have a hypothesis, but now it goes into the prove it part. And so this will be a really powerful time as Sun moves into Sagittarius for a lot of the things that need fact checking to come into the light. We will most likely see throughout the next month a big play of truth reveal coming through as Sun is in Sagittarius. Sun is a fire sign and Sagittarius is a fire sign, and so it's very comfortable and very welcomed in his brother's house, brother being Leo, where the Sun is home. So look for that fact-checking information coming through in this next month's time too, which I could really use right now myself. I'm looking forward to that. Then we move on, November 23rd. Mercury will trine Neptune. What do you have on this?
This is a sweet aspect, I think. Neptune has been a big player all throughout this year, but it's been on the underbelly. We haven't talked about it as much as we've talked about like Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn. But I will just throw out the little nugget that Neptune rules pandemics and things like that that spread nebulously around the whole planet. It can also be consciousness that spreads around the whole planet. And we have mentioned before that however you take this coronavirus COVID event, it has changed the consciousness of the entire planet. It has indiscriminately touched every corner. And astrologers have been saying that 2020 somehow is going to evolve, change, dramatically create new patterns in this world. And I think Neptune has been a big underplayer of this. And Neptune's been in its home sign of Pisces this whole time and will be for another 7 years continuing forward. But trine Mercury, Neptune is opening up spiritual awareness, spiritual acumen, dreams, imagination, creativity, love, into the mental. And Mercury also has a lot to do with psychology, meaning the mind and emotional body linked together. And so it could be like healing through spiritual awareness to the mental emotional body. And there's been a lot of mental emotional pain these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that'll be a real sweet aspect to helping calm the mind's fever, if you will, and letting this sense of faith. Neptune is a strong faith, like Jupiter is faith. This is a spiritual faith when you go into Neptune. All these planets have a shadow side. So the shadow side of Neptune is delusion and
isolation.
Yeah, isolation, paranoia, and and it can be deep fear. It's the ocean, it's the water. And, sometimes if we're out in the Caribbean and the water's crystal clear and the sun is warm, we have no problem with the ocean. But if we're out in the Nordic seas and it's an icy day and the waves are high and we're tossed off the ship into the water, we're scared to pieces. So it's that same way, the beautiful calm waters or the torrential sea. And this particular aspect of trining with Mercury lends itself to those calmer waters of calming the mind and letting the mind remember its higher mind consciousness. And something to help that is the Gayatri Mantra. If you know the Gayatri Mantra, it brings light and cleanses the mental or intellect and helps to bring it into a more higher consciousness or awareness than just that chitta or that little critic that goes on analyzing everything to the nth degree. So maybe chant the Gayatri Mantra if you're familiar with it. Okay, so another positive aspect, shortly after that on November 26th, the sun will trine Chiron.
Thanksgiving Day.
Right, that's right. Yay!
You were saying, you already talked about this one, so why don't you share what you thought that meant?
When we realized that this aspect was actually on Thanksgiving, it's like, oh good, if people are allowed to gather with their families on this day, which can sometimes be challenging because Chiron is our wounds and oftentimes our family is the source of our wounds. And so this Thanksgiving meal might be, a lot of times people struggle with the holidays for that reason. But this is a harmonious trine. There's light on the wound at the time of Thanksgiving. And that light is in a good way, like a healing light, like a purification of the wound, if you will. They're working together. And the sun is your outward expression of who you are. So when you go to your Thanksgiving meal with whomever you're sharing it with, your wound will be healed so that you can be your full expression of self without having to play small or dim your light or protect that wound so much because of this aspect, is the way I kind of looked at that one.
Mm-hmm.
You have anything else on Sun trine Chiron?
No, I think that's good.
Okay. We'll move on. We're almost done. We're on November 27th. Venus will be in opposition of Uranus. Ugh, that's the random card in this whole deck on this one, I think. You want to speak to that one?
Similar but different planet from the Mercury opposite Uranus that happened on November 17th. As Katrina said, I described a bunch of things that Uranus was in that first round of description. It also has to do with unpredictable events. Random is a good word, but it's also not a good word in that nothing is random. However, it's random in that our mental capacity can't predict what's going to happen, and so to the mind, it's random. And the mind can't always understand the network of why. And so it says, well, this must be random. I can't figure it out. So Uranus can deliver unexpected, unpredictable, unknown things into the field that were just extraterrestrial, out of left field. What it is, our friend Rick Levine says, I can't predict it, but predict that something's going to happen.
And then opposite of Venus, which is love, which is self-worth, which is your values again. And so random things can happen to your love life and to your, again, random is not really random, just to the mind it seems random, to your sense of self-worth. And it could go either way. It could be a jolt to the system that's difficult or challenging. But again, remember, consciousness can't arrive without pain also, so maybe that'll be a good thing. But I like to spin it positive and think, a little jolt to the love boat there, and maybe you get a boost in pay, or maybe you get a sweet offering, some abundance comes into your life, or a little
something that you love and vision comes into being.
Right. Yeah.
Like a retreat center.
Like a retreat center. That's
I think a good
awesome.
word for random is mind blown.
Yeah, I like that. Mind blown on November 27th. A lot of potential for that. Oh, and that's Black Friday too, isn't it?
Mind blown.
Oh, wow. So interesting. Then we move on. And the last one is Neptune direct on November 28th, Saturday. I guess not the last one, the second to last one is Neptune direct. And what do you say about that? How does that tie into our theme?
Well, Neptune has been retrograde for almost 5 months. All throughout the summer, we were talking about all the retrogrades. At one point, there was about 7 planetary bodies in retrograde, and over the course of summer, 9 total, I think. And Neptune is one of the last ones to then go direct. Next, we have Uranus, and that will be in next month's report. So Neptune direct has to do with when Neptune is retrograde, it turns us inside. It turns us into the inner realms to have a look at our spirituality. Look at where we might be delusional. Look at where we might be addicted to things. Look at where we might be out of alignment with our spiritual path. It can also bring lots of clarity around that, but one of Neptune's ways that it brings clarity is to introduce confusion. Does that sound like anything we've been going through? Confusion and chaos are 2 of Neptune's mechanism when things are out of alignment. And Neptune moves like a wave. It will come in, and if something is not in alignment, it will just wash it out and diffuse it away, and it's never coming back. One statement that people says is, I can't wait for things to get back to normal. The Neptune wave of the pandemic is saying it will never go back the way it was again. It's like trying to put the ocean back into your hands. So when it's going direct, what all this chaos and confusion has been about has been, at least from the spiritual side, to awaken to spirituality. And when it's going forward, it gives meaning to what happened.
There's another Carl Jung quote that I'll use that says, out of chaos is the cosmos, and out of disorder is a secret order. So this is kind of what feels like nebulous and hard to hold. Neptune is so not tangible. You can't grab it. Like you said, trying to hold the ocean in your hands, it just slips through the fingers. So it requires us to take a leap of faith or to trust our higher self more greatly. And so that's part of the quote again was, as far as we can discern, the sole purpose of the human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. And we think this Neptune going direct will help us to see that we are more than just human beings walking an earth walk in this 3rd dimension earth plane, that we have this whole light grid that we can't see with our external eyes. But if we awaken our 3rd eye, we'll be able to see this unified field of consciousness that we already belong to, this light grid of consciousness, and we can begin to tap into this higher realm of existence with Neptune going direct, and this big wave washing us in what seems like disorder is really a secret order. And then we arrive at the beginning of the next report, which will be the Gemini full moon and
Penumbral lunar eclipse.
yay.
We'll talk about that next report, but we're in the energy of eclipse season now.
And remember, eclipse is to cut. So as we are, embarking on this new beginning, all these wheels of new beginnings coming into motion, we can cut these old cords and let these old energies die off and bring in this new light consciousness and start this evolution of change, revolution of change. All right, I think that's all we have for this time. Thank you, and we'll see you at the full moon.
Namaste.
Namaste. Happy Thanksgiving.